Hey, so this is the Drunkalogs, a podcast about addiction and recovery in which each guest shares their version of how it was, what happened, and how it is now, and then endures a half-hour Q&A at the hands of your host, Nick Morton. My next guest is a performer, writer, comedian, creative coach, and muse who is perhaps most famous for creating, hosting, and producing the legendary LA comedy show Uncabaret, which recently celebrated its 25th anniversary with an epic iteration at the Ace Hotel. She has been sober for 9 years now, and the journey that brought her here includes side trips through eviction, yoga, and angel healing, to name a few. But the wisdom she picked up along the way is nothing short of profound. Won't you please welcome Beth Lapides.
Without a mission, I don't necessarily know who I am. Like we did our 25th anniversary show at the theater at the Ace last year, and it's just 1,800 people, and all the we had Bob Odenkirk and Patton Oswalt and Julie Sweeney and Sandra Bernhard. Everybody was coming. We had a 10-piece band, and it's 1,800 seats, and we were doing it with Cap UCLA, and I mean it was like this, and there was all this history, and it's and it will get in. It's part of my sober story is coming back to Uncabaret. So there was just a lot of, and I wrote a cover story for the LA Weekly. It was like a wedding size event. And after that was over, I did feel a little bit postpartum, and now what is this it? I mean, which people don't always realize it was from unhomophobic, unmisogynist, unxenophobic, Uncabaret, which came out of an audience saying, they couldn't go to see comedy because it was so
homophobic, xenophobic,
yes,
racist,
and so
else.
I had just responded immediately in the moment to those people. Right. I'll make you this show. It'll be, and it was really, I do believe, it was like a download. It was God speaking, whatever you want to call it, divine intervention. So in some ways, I did get sober for the work. I did it, and, somebody said to me, well, you're going to see, your work will change and evolve. But in some ways, I felt like I was not meeting my potential as an artist. Sure. And that mattered to me more than anything else. I didn't know that I had a problem. I was not one of those people who was walking around going I really need to get sober. I mean, gosh, if I could just stop drinking and trying and not, that wasn't my story. At all.
Well, let's start
in the day. Okay, go ahead.
Let's start at the beginning.
Let's do it.
Beth, it's Beth Lapides, right?
That's correct. Part of my sobriety that happened on this very block.
Oh, really?
So we can talk about that. Yeah.
Wow, that's exciting.
In a very early part of my sobriety.
That's amazing.
So that we can go there. Yeah.
Good. Where are you from?
Oh, I'm from New Haven, East Coast. I'm an East Coast girl. New Haven, Providence, New York.
So when did you start drinking then?
I started drinking. My first drink was at a bar mitzvah.
So 13, approx.
12, 13,
right.
Yeah. And whiskey sour. And I didn't, you hear people say all the time, oh, no, that's the thing I'd been waiting for. And I had the feeling. I don't think I had 3 sips. I don't know. Right. And then my mom, I remember, called me into the bathroom. She was taking a bath. This was very unusual.
Right.
She called me in and she said, I heard you were drinking at, Stevie's bar mitzvah. And, I was like, oh, well. And she said, well, promise me you'll never do that again. And I did. And so instantly I'm a liar because I knew. So, when you hear alcohol makes you into a liar, it just happened immediately.
Sure.
That happened.
Was it a drinky culture you grew up in?
Yeah, it was. My dad drank, after work, definitely, come home, have a drink. Come home, have a drink. My mom didn't drink at all. Right. I was a really good student. Went to Ivy League school.
So you graduated from high school. Where'd you go to Ivy League school?
I went to Brown.
Right.
I went to my classes. I did my thing. I graduated cum laude. I was an achiever. It didn't seem to be getting in the way of my achievement.
Right.
And then I moved to New York, where I continued, just being an artist, and I got a loft, and I would work and get high. And
what would you do for work?
When I first moved to New York, I just did I was a model. I was an artist model. odd painting buses, and I got a job finally at a copy shop, which I loved because it was sort of part of printmaking, and I could, I felt like I was printmaking, and I was meeting a ton of people. It was a very good location in the village, and pretty soon after I was in New York, it did not take too long. I got an NEA, which there's so little money for the arts anymore. Nobody even knows what that is.
Sure.
It's a national endowment. What is that? It's a
Right.
it was a grant for artists. And I quit my job. I mean, again, this, if you want to talk about the unrealisticness, I got like, a $5,000 grant. It was a long time ago, but still. So maybe it'd be $10,000 now. I mean, it's not going to last you the rest of your life.
Sure.
But I quit my job. I was like, well, that's it. No more jobs.
I did it.
I did it. I know I've done it. I'm here. And that kind of is, I've been broke. I've been in debt, but I did.
What was the grant to fund?
The grant was, I was making these one-of-a-kind books.
Uh-huh.
And this is the part of like being an addict and alcoholic that's sort of great, is on the unrealisticness. There's a thing that's like a book, there's book art, and it's mostly very pristine and very nicely crafted. Mine looked like they were made with bubble gum, and I mean, they were very gloppy, and then I painted in them, and I painted the paintings, and then I wrote, the story was painted in with the drawings, and I made them I would find wedding invitations in a dumpster and put them together. It was a very assemblage.
Cool. Yeah.
They were super cool. And I started getting shows, and I was in a show at the Metropolitan Museum of Art Library, and I was plugged in, and it was happening.
Right.
But then I got this thing, like, I don't want to just make art for rich people.
Right.
And
people are buying these things.
No, nobody was. But I was showing them in galleries, and then I was thinking, well, how am I going to make a living off of it? Even I at least knew to ask that question. I mean, and I was like, well, rich people buy them. That's what you do. That's how it happens.
Yeah.
And then I was like, that's kind of icky. I don't want to do that. Have a life that's like you're making anyway. So I got this idea that I was going to.
Isn't that what art? That's like creating art largely is, right?
Well, in a way, but there are ways around it. I mean, printmaking is one of the ways around it, and at least with painting, you could be in a museum and anybody can come. But with a book, like, you kind of have to hold it. These books were not made to. It was impossible.
Right.
And so I got this idea that I was going to make these books giant.
Oh, wow.
And then I would perform in front of them and tell the stories.
Right. Cool.
And that's what I did. And then I wrote a grant, and I didn't give it a second thought. I think I wrote it in like crayon. I mean, it was like, when I think how much I work over things now and second guess things. And, so I was like, I want to make these little books into big books. And I got it. And it was just so from the heart,
Right.
And so that was my first grant. And then I got a number, and then I became sort of a multimedia performance art artist, and I got a bunch of grants, and I started touring, and I toured internationally to like art centers and colleges, and I was doing that I did that for a couple of years, and I had established a reputation, reviews.
And were the stories you were telling, were they
autobiographical? It was narrative,
right, yeah.
But they weren't generally like one long story for the whole show. The show would like have an idea,
right,
and then there would be stories in it. Like one was called Crash Course, and it was about particle physics and learning science, and trying to understand what the world was. Like, it was essentially what my shows were.
Right.
Like, I didn't get, and then when I look back in retrospect, it's like that feeling of being mystified by the world. We talk about the world as the world, life on life's terms. I think I was confounded.
Sure.
What is this life? And I never went to first grade, and I feel like in some ways, like, I missed the instruction. I had never been in a class where they taught you how to be in school.
Right.
I mean, the beginning of my addiction, when I look back to where it started, was earlier than that. It was I was like 5 years old. I was in the hospital. I had an disorder, blood disorder. It was an autoimmune disease. And I always made the joke, well, I was just claustrophobic and I needed to get out of my house. I think I was always very anxious to get out in the world.
Right.
I need more life, and I need to be, more. And I was suburban New Haven, and it just seemed so like, when can I leave? I didn't come from like a household of, rampant shamelessness. It wasn't like, oh my God, it's chaos.
Right.
It wasn't that at all. And in fact, if anything, it was too ordered, and my emotions were messy, and so I was in the hospital, and there was a lot of blood tests, and they would always say, this is not going to hurt, and it always hurt. And really, honesty was something that was in my family, an important was valued. Anyway, so I had this idea, you're supposed to tell the truth, but then there I am in the hospital. and they keep telling me it's not going to hurt. So I get the idea. I realized, as I got sober, that the one thing you could lie about was being in pain. Like, being in pain was so bad and so unacceptable that that's the thing you lie about. So then, of course, you try to be out of pain. You just don't want to be in pain. So you're uncomfortable. So get out of, So, of course, you're in adolescent. It's uncomfortable. You start drinking. You start smoking. It all makes so much sense to me.
Like, society doesn't allow us to be in pain. Like, nobody can accept that we're all in pain.
It's not encouraged. It's certainly, it's not encouraged.
It's just amazing. Like, sometimes I'm not in pain, but sometimes I'm in acute pain. And, like, I just can't.
And you feel like there's something wrong with you because that's not supposed to be what it is.
Right, and you can't share it with people. Like sometimes I feel like my pain is so profound that if I let anyone in on it, they'll drown in it with me.
Yeah. Well, yeah. The emotions. I mean, I remember being a teenager and just having this awful, like, outpouring and feeling like there's nowhere for this to go.
Right.
And, it was so unacceptable.
So... whatever, you discover sort of medicating yourself in high school, and then you're touring around with this show.
I'm touring around with
like
this show.
Artist,
it's lonely.
Well,
it's lonely,
yeah.
Because it's not like you're in a band and you're not touring with people. There's not a tour manager.
Sure.
There's not that kind of richness to it.
There isn't that camaraderie.
And there's not that camaraderie. There's not that financial support, but I'm doing it. And then I'm walking around New York and I'm smoking like the worst weed in the world.
Right.
Anyway, I'm walking around New York one day and I get this thought that all of life is like you don't get it and then suddenly you get it and then you die. Like, that's what it is.
Right.
And then I thought that's either tragic or hilarious. And then I was like, I think you get to pick. Like, that is what you get to pick. Is what your take on this truth. Sure. And I was like, I just have to believe it's hilarious. Right. I have to. So, and I kind of also saw the limits of like the performance art world. I was like, am I really going to it's sort of you're in a relationship and you're like, is this really going to go the distance? Right. I'm like in my early 20s. Like, what is this? I'm just going to tour for these same 10,000 people every year? Or, I decided I was going to start going into the comedy world very consciously. And I started just going to comedy clubs and getting spots. I mean, I had so much performance experience. I had a lot of stage presence. I remember I did one gig where the owner was like, I just don't get it. They're sitting there and they're listening to you and they're not laughing. That never happens. and I was like, well, because I'd been already, doing this thing, but I didn't get this. And he said, well, I know you're doing wrong. I was like, what? And he said, well, it's the rhythm. Comedy is 1, 2, 1, 2, and you're going 1, 2, 1, 2, and it's like you're trying to do jazz in a rock club. I mean, that's what it is. And I was like, oh my God, that's the greatest thing I ever heard. Just thank you so much. And so I started walking around New York going like 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and of course that wasn't it, But
I was going to say, that's amazing. The secret to comedy is revealed right here.
Well, what he was right in the thing that there is a thing of comic timing, which is, you need to be, ooh, sorry. Is that all right?
That's me hitting my elbow.
You do need to be able to punch in that way that I wasn't doing.
Right, sure.
But you have your own, and one reason I started on Cabaret was I just was so... I mean, besides all those uns, that the unhacky part of, I just hated being in the comedy clubs and people getting laughs on things just because of the comedy rhythm that they were using. Right. And that just sort of mind numbing. I always felt like I was being tricked into laughing. So anyway, and then I shifted to comedy, and now I'm working in nightclubs. Right. Now I'm right close to the alcohol. Yeah. And it's easy. And
you're still in New York at this point?
I'm still in New York. Right. And I'm so petrified of comedy. Right. It's so scary. And I'm such a, I'm an artist, and I'm making this move. And it was super scary because, it was like a hard ego thing. You go from like going to a city and getting like reviews and articles. And even though it's art and not like the mainstream, you are being celebrated and you're respected.
something definitely.
And then now you're in a comedy club
yeah.
and it's midnight and you have 6 minutes and there's 4 drunks and, you know, it's hard to perform on a different wavelength. Everybody's drinking. And so you know, have a few drinks and you're waiting and the drinks are free and,
right.
you know, or maybe they're not, but they were, you know, whatever.
They feel free.
They feel free. They feel free. And they often were free.
Right.
So, but I did not, you know, there again, at this point, no problem. I never would have moved to Los Angeles. I had gotten married and he got a screenwriting agent. And anyway, here we are.
So you guys basically moved out here for his career.
Yes.
Right.
I did slightly feel like maybe I had used New York up a little bit.
Sure. I mean, that's fair. People can grow up and move on, you know?
Yeah.
It's not just geographics, you know?
Yeah, but I've done 2 geographics, and both of them have taught me so much, and it's hard to say. That one was less of a geographic, I think.
Right.
My drinking then is very, and drugs, very... very steady state.
And you're out here doing stand-up?
I'm out here doing stand-up and the one-person shows. I don't ever let them go.
Right.
Because I have more to say than I can say in clubs.
6 minutes. And
you know, even if you're getting 20 minutes. And I'm doing one-nights, these horrible one-nighters that you get paid for, you know, everywhere that you can drive to. From,
sure.
You know, the West Covina and the Lompoc and, you know, Long Beach and just... and I'm
together.
Me and I'm weird and I'm, you know, I'm barely okay in Los Angeles. Comedians were always super supportive. I felt like a lot of, not every comedian, but I felt within the community support. But, you know, going out to like regular people was always a little scary.
Right.
My using didn't progress really at that point. I never was a morning drinker or day drinker. I could wait.
Yeah.
But so I'm in my 9th year now. I'm not really dealing with early sobriety stuff, but I'm, you know, the mind, the mental health.
You know, I'm sort of in the same place you are in sobriety a little bit in that like I'm done with like a lot of those early sobriety issues, but I'm crazy. And like the past couple months, I've really just been like learning to just like accept, I mean, like getting a new level of acceptance with, you know, just like my fundamental bewilderment and like my general uncomfortableness with life. Which is good. I mean, I feel I'm like, wow, maybe I've found some
2 things that have happened to me
to peace now, but I'm not sure.
The things about that for me were in early sobriety. Somebody said I was really baffled. I mean, everything. I had a really hard beginning. Everything fell apart. I had my bottom. I had a sober bottom. In the first 2 years, I moved 18 times. I divorced, bankruptcy, lost a house. I mean, it was really, truly challenging.
Right.
And a lot of decisions had to be made, and I was spinning. I did so much spinning with a friend of mine who was sober for a long time, and I was living in his garage, and he laughed, and he said, "Oh, honey, don't worry. Less will be revealed."
That's the most depressing thing I've ever heard.
But in a way, it made me laugh, and it is funny.
It's really funny.
Once I surrendered to that idea, and I stopped thinking I should know. I mean, I sort of gave up the idea about opinions. I stopped being opinionated. I stopped feeling like I had to know. I mean, I had so much attachment to being the smart girl, and I had so much. It was so part of my brand even, I guess. Right. I don't know. And I gave it up. And it was hard, but it was very liberating. So that has been helpful. A helpful mental thing. Yeah. And then the other thing was one day I was so uncomfortable, like you're saying. This was maybe around year 5 or something. 6, something like that. And it's just that thing where you're suddenly like so uncomfortable and it's everything that's wrong. And it's not even a thing that happened. Just the wave comes over you.
Yeah.
And I remember I was on the corner of Fairfax and Melrose. And for some reason, it's a very spiritual corner for me. Right in that area, I feel a lot of like, you know, sky, God, whatever. And maybe it's the Hasidics crossing the street. I don't know.
It's all the Jews. It's the Jewish bakeries.
It might be. It might be for me. It's my people, finally. But I got this thought. that was, maybe this is perfect.
Right.
And then I thought, it really might be. And then I thought to myself, well, do you know what perfect is? Like, have you ever experienced perfection? Like, that you could go, like, this is perfect? No. Well, if you don't know what perfect is, maybe this is it. And I started to use that as a touchstone thought when the uncomfortableness came over me.
That's amazing.
It doesn't necessarily help instantly. I often, I'm not, it's not like I never have a bad day anymore.
But like that,
but
to
it
be
is
able to step outside it in some ways. I mean, sometimes just like, they say in science that, the act of observing a particle changes its position.
Yes. Oh my God. That's the thing about performing in audiences.
Right.
Where I worked so hard to get the great audience on Cabaret because the observer changes the observed.
Yes. And I find that actually happens with my emotions and my sense of doom is that just observing it changes it. Doesn't always fix it, but at least it it changes my relationship to it. Yes. If I can just be like, whoa, that is a thing, like, and then to look at that and say, well, what if that's perfect? Like, now I'm in a different place altogether. Yeah. I'm curious about my own state as opposed to being dismissive or damning or contemptuous of my own state. And that's already you're on the that's recovery there in the moment. That is recovery in the moment.
I mean, that is, we're restored to sanity again and again and again. We're not restored to sanity once.
Yeah.
It's a daily reprieve and it's a momentary reprieve and it happens over and over, and it is about getting outside yourself a lot of times. I mean, one thing I do love in the book says, because even at the beginning I had a lot of, I don't know if I'm an alcoholic.
Right.
And the one thing that I heard as a definition that really did help me say, well, you might, some are sicker than others and you might not be the sickest, but we're sensitive to in the extreme.
Yeah, right.
And that's a blessing. Once I could see that, that's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
But because of this amazing thing, I've put myself in danger. I've put myself in harm's way. I've hurt other people. Sure. I don't have to take that action that I've been taking because I'm so sensitive.
Right.
So one thing that happened was I denied it for a long time. I'm friends with Andy Dick, and you live in Hollywood, and the bar for bottoms is very high.
Sure.
And Andy Dick was like in my circle. I mean, he's like the poster boy for it, and he was part of On Cabaret. And I mean, that to me was. I look at that and just say,
destructive,
well, I'm not that.
Like, yeah.
I mean, that to me was the definition.
At what point do you start On Cabaret? I mean, is that...
I was here for a couple of years, maybe a year or two.
Right.
I mean, not long.
And when you began, where were you doing it?
At this venue called the Women's Building. I was doing this one-person show and going to Europe with it, and I wanted to sort of refresh it. And this is where the audience said, they laughed a little too hard. You know how funny your thing is. I was like, God, when was the last time you laughed? And they're like, we don't laugh because we're women and we're artists and we're lesbians, and if we go to comedy clubs, they make fun of us. And I said, I'll make your show be homophobic and xenophobic and misogynist on Cabaret. And we did it there.
And was it always, music was always a part of it, I assume?
Music was not. No,
really?
No, not
but
at all.
It's interesting because I think of Cabaret and I think of there being
but it was I don't even know what On Cabaret meant.
Right.
I had never even been to a cabaret. I mean, I wasn't that girl.
It's such a great title for a show.
I mean, it wasn't even like, I didn't know to me, what it meant was I hated the thing in the comedy world where everything, the status quo was sort of okay. I don't know. And I didn't even know exactly what I wanted it to be. I knew I wanted it to be different. And I just started booking people and it wasn't even clear what it was. Then they lost their funding and then I moved it to Highways Performance Art Space, which is in Santa Monica. And, we booked late night Saturdays there for a while, like a run of late night Saturdays that kept getting extended. And that run So I sort of think it was like inseminated at the Women's Building, and then it gestated at Highways,
Right.
which was really just me, Taylor, Negron, and Judy Toll.
Right.
And it was the three of us, and that particular combination.
And would you bring in other guests?
No,
it was just the three of you.
I ran it
Right.
and brought those two in.
And you would do it every week?
We did it every Saturday night.
Wow.
For a while, for a couple months.
And would the
Saturday
show
night.
change?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was the idea from the beginning.
Right.
It was
It was
different
always a different show.
Yeah. But, the same three people.
Yeah, yeah.
So it wasn't that different.
Right.
And that sort of was Taylor's eccentric, poetic sort of slapstick storytelling, and he was such a unique, incredible artist. And Judy had this very strong sense of everyone's your best friend. She was very confessional stand-up before anybody else was really doing that. And then I had these sort of mega ideas, and was sort of very brainiac, and more so than I even am now, and was sort of glamorous on big beehives. And so we were the three of us, and gender bendy in a certain way. And anyway, we did it there in this art world performance space. And then was the election of 92, and I had become distracted with my campaign to make First Lady an elected position.
Right.
And when that was over, Jean-Pierre Beccaro, who was a great impresario of clubs in Los Angeles, had already had the Lhasa Club, and Largo was opening a new venue called Luna Park, and he called me and wanted to know if I wanted to do something there. And I said, oh God, I've really been looking for a place to do on Cabaret, which I had been. I've been looking and looking. And he said, I don't know, is it going to be funny? I said, no, it's not going to be funny. Yes.
Park,
so he booked it for 3 Sunday nights, and we ran for 7 years, and during that time,
it was in the basement,
yeah,
right?
it was in the basement, that little room, and
so
and
cool.
I mean, I've talked, and I don't want to spend too much time in this context, but that particular archaeology, the sort of that architecture, the going downstairs into the subconscious. The room was small. There was like a mirror that you turned away from. There was a lot of things that made that room very perfect to birth this new kind of thing. And we were there for 7 years. We did the Comedy Central show there, and we did radio shows while I was there. But we kept up every 7 years. And during that time, I had moved to Hancock Park because of the radio show. And I remember there I changed my drink because I was too drunk at the end of the show. Didn't stop drinking, but I changed my drink from.
So the show at that point had morphed into storytelling?
No, it always is. It walks that line. It's a comedy show.
It is a comedy show.
But it's a comedy show that has story-based stand-up.
Right.
And more than being story-based, it was stories that were grounded in the now. It was really talking about the now. Right. Whether that now was a point of view about a movie you went to see, or a fight with your boyfriend, or whatever it was the ongoing story of your life and what was in your mind in the now. And there were stories in it, but it was not just... Anyway, so that's another show.
Sorry,
so
I
that's
don't want to make you crazy
No.
talking about the thing. It's just so fascinating.
Thank you.
I mean, it's like an iconic part of the LA comedy scene.
Thank you.
So it would be remiss not to kind of explore it.
So at that point, maybe I should have known. Anyway, we went from there to the HBO workspace.
What was your just out of curiosity for some fun here?
What was my drink?
What drink did you? What did you migrate between?
I started with I because New York or Scotch,
right?
And then I soon realized I can't run a whole show and be, there were some nights, at the end of that, thank you very much for coming, And it was nerve-wracking because I was like working with the best comedians, and I wasn't really necessarily. It was my vision, but I didn't have 20,000 hours of stand-up behind me, And people were like, "Oh yeah," when everyone was starting out, I was like, "They weren't starting out;
they were established.
They were like, it was like
feels that way now."
Bob Odenkirk, after Saturday Night Live, Patton Oswalt from San Francisco, Dana Gould after his HBO One Night Stand. This wasn't everybody like just fresh off the boat. And
you moved from Scotch to what?
I moved from Scotch to Campari.
And And so when you guys did like the HBO special there,
No, it was a Comedy Central, but yeah.
Comedy Central.
Yeah.
What were you like?
I didn't drink during it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
But I did drink. Oh, maybe I did. I don't know. I don't think so.
But you kept it together.
I was maybe.
Well, also the stress and the adrenaline is so high. You could probably drink a tank full of scotch and still not be drunk.
No, I might have had a Campari.
Right.
I don't think so.
So Campari
But I tell you this, I did drink the night before.
Right.
The network took us out to very fancy dinner, and it didn't occur to me that the night before the show, you don't have a drink that night.
That is in some ways the most, like, I got so drunk the night before my wedding, and like I was a wreck that day, and like my wife is still angry about the state I was in at the wedding, but I was like, I wasn't that drunk at the wedding. I was just so hungover from the night before.
I mean, I think if anybody's listening that, is sober curious. I mean, really, and some days when it was really hard at the beginning, I would just say, well, I'm not hungover. Never have to be hungover again. And I wasn't hungover for the Comedy Central show, but I shouldn't have,
you weren't all there. You weren't as sharp as,
I never know.
Right.
You'll never know.
Right.
You'll never know. I did a good job. The show was,
right. It was a success.
It was a success. We didn't get picked up as a series because they were like, I think we'll go with South Park. And from there I did like an MTV talk show that looked like it was going to be green light lit and then wasn't. And, things were happening, but they weren't, I couldn't get the momentum that I felt.
Sure.
So I was frustrated and, I was... Anyway, I was on Sex and the City. Things kept happening, but I didn't have a trajectory. But also, I was a girl who never really dreamed of living in Hollywood. I mean,
so you're like, what am I doing here?
I dreamt of coming to New York and being like Van Gogh.
Right.
And then that morphed and changed, and that was real. And it made sense I was in LA, but I had never really planned my life that way. And I don't think I ever really, there was a lot about Hollywood I didn't understand when we came here. I remember at the very, I was trying to get an agent, and I had an agent tell me at the beginning, oh my God, you're just too original. And I just thought, and I laughed. I thought, oh my God, he's kidding. And then I realized he was serious. And now I realize like, oh, that's like real. They like don't know how to.
Yeah, there is that thing where it's like we want it different but the same.
Which category do I put you in? So, and the more complicated you are, the longer it takes. I mean, I tell people that which is true.
Interesting.
But after, and then I got the radio show, so I did feel like it all sort of worked out because. And I got that. I did a showcase. I mean, we were working at HBO Workspace, and then I did a showcase show there called Party Pants, and then and from there, this guy who was starting this radio network saw me, and blah blah. Anyway, and it was a very natural extension of hosting on Cab to have a radio show.
Right.
I was really happy doing it. Except I did keep thinking like, I don't know, where's the fun part? Like, I kept thinking when I got successful that there was some other red carpet part that was going to be more fun than the thing itself.
Right.
Where now I'm just like, the work, I mean...
The work is the fun.
I mean, everybody loves a fancy party dress, but the work is the reward. I think I didn't get that at the...
No, I agree. I think that's a huge thing that you don't understand. It takes a lot of experience in Hollywood to understand that, like, oh, the party is not the fun part.
The party isn't the fun part. Really isn't. So, and then that network collapsed, and then there I am, totally exhausted, no adrenaline burnout. I'm assuming Miss Sue said you have no adrenaline. And I'm trying to get things going again. And then maybe we kick into a new level of drinking and smoking, and I try to quit. I don't know. And I'm still, but I'm deep into yoga at this point. I have a very serious yoga practice, which tells me all the time there's no problem with anything like drinking or drugs, because I'm a yogi. I have a spirit. I'm a spiritual girl. I'm known for it. And I went to my gynecologist actually, and she said, "You don't seem like yourself. You seem depressed. You want antidepressants." And I was like, "I'm not depressed. What are you talking about?" And soon thereafter, and I started spending a lot of time, and I had a lot of back pain, and going to a lot of people to try to help fix my back pain. And I have a lot of comedy about that. And then, one day we were evicted.
From your house?
Yeah, from this great apartment we had moved to in Hancock Park. And through no fault of our own, I say in air quotes, and it wasn't like there was no unpaid rent, there was no meth lab, there was no, brothel, but it was, there had been a for sale sign on the front lawn for months.
Right.
The building was sold and new landlords, and it was a 4-unit building, and you can move your family in, and they kept saying, we're not going to evict you, which of course means we're going to evict you. I live in Hollywood. I understand opposites speak. And, it was like that thing of not paying attention carefully enough.
Right.
And I do, I could tell you the 20-minute story of it. There's a dove, and, there's all signs and symbols and meanings, and it's, very exciting. But, we have to move, and I feel like we need to move to it. And we have a little money saved up, and now we need to buy a house. We need to buy a house, but it's the real estate bubble, and we can't afford anything we like, and so.
What year are we in? We're like 2006 or something.
Something like that, and 5, 6. I can never remember something like that.
Yeah.
And we could move to another apartment, but. There's little trouble with the relationship that I'm not even really realizing is there. In retrospect, I see. I mean, if you're with somebody you love, you move to a smaller place, and that's just what it is.
Right.
But the idea of being in a smaller place and where I need my own, we end up moving. This is the crazy geographic. So we keep looking for. I'm like, I just need to live 10 minutes from City Yoga. I need to live near my yoga studio. That's all I need. And of course, now not realizing like I'm clinging to my yoga studio when non-attachment is one of the main ideas of yoga. So we keep looking farther and farther. You get 90 days, and everybody starts telling me being evicted is the best thing that ever happened to me. And one of the things I think of my own disease is like this need, the not being in pain is to just be fine. I grew up with it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. You only know how bad it is by like the octave of the fine. Fine, it's fine. And so it was, I finally we're like looking for people so I'm like, that's what it's, this eviction is going to be the best thing that ever happened to me. It's not going to be fine. It's going to be the best thing. I have no idea how am I going to make that happen? So people keep saying, why don't you look at Mount Washington? And I say, where even is Mount Washington? And they say, it's just over the 2. And I say, where's the 2? And one day we schlep up to Mount Washington, and, I just was like, I can't live here.
Right.
I mean, it's just too far away. From what? Right. I mean, from what? Is it too far
Too
away?
far away. From Luna Park.
From where? The show's now at M Bar, and my yoga's over there. I just feel like for me, it was too far from something. And I couldn't imagine driving home there late at night. I don't know. I just couldn't see it. You just have a thing like you just can't see.
Yeah.
And I said, if we're going to live this far away, we may as well live in Palm Springs.
Right.
And then my partner said, like, that's the best idea you ever had. And I was like, that's not an idea. That's a joke. And he's like, no. You always say, go where the love is. And I do always say that. And we love Palm Springs. And we did love Palm Springs. And the architecture is so great. And there's a purity. Anyway, fade out, fade in. We moved to Palm Springs.
Wow. That's intense.
And that's a crazy geographic. But the plan was, and this was crazier, I mean, we bought a mid-century modern, we fixed it up. I had been lying in bed. I mean, part of what happened is in my bottom, which was in LA, which if I had only recognized it as a bottom, lying in bed during the day, watching just hour after hour of HGTV, fixing up your own life too hard, watch other people fix up their houses. And writing, I did write. I kept trying to write my way out of it. I wrote a book called The Best Case Scenario that I finished on the day before 9/11.
Right.
And then put away. Then I had the horrible apocalyptic nightmare the night before 9/11, which a lot of people have had. Sensitive, very sensitive. So there we are in Palm Springs. Now, Palm Springs is where, drinking is really a thing. That's what
Party
you do there.
Culture there, yeah.
This just feels like drinking. I mean, we didn't even, because I would come in to LA for the weekend and do the shows and stay with friends.
Right.
And this is where we get to this block. One of the places where we stayed at was right on your very block.
Right.
And, not your block, but this street a little further up. And So here's what happens on this block. So I've told you the story of the back pain. I get sent to, this is a roundabout. I get sent to Vegas to cover Louise Hay's I Can Do It convention.
Right.
At that convention, I'm interviewing all the authors, and there's this one that's an angel healer. And angel healing is where I draw my woo-woo line.
Right.
I'm like, UFOs, sure. Past life, sure. Secrets buried under the pyramids, sure. All of it. I'm the orbs, into it. But somehow angels, like, no. I don't, So anyway, I'm interviewing her and she says, why don't I just do it on you? And I'm like, all right, sure. She says, well, your angels want me to tell you no dairy.
Okay.
And I'm like, oh, okay. And she says, and your angels want me to tell you you can't smoke. I said, anything? She says, yeah, anything. And I said, can I drink? She says, yes, your angels say you can drink. And I thought that gave the angels more credibility.
Right.
So I was like, all right. And then she says to me, I'm going to get back to that, but then she says to me, do you have any questions for your angels? I said, well, I've had this back pain. I've done everything and I can't. She says, oh my God, you have a huge psychic dagger in your back. And I was like, that is exactly what it feels like.
Right.
She says, do you want me to take it out? And I said, no, as long as I know what it is, leave it in. No, of course, take it out. But I can't tell immediately, like, if it's out, because chronic pain, is it there, is it gone, it comes and it goes.
Sure.
I have a come to Jesus moment. I'm a Jew, I know, but like a come to, that night in my hotel bathroom, and I'm looking in the mirror and I'm like, are you an angel believing in girl now? Is that who you are?
Right.
And then I'm like, well, I think I have two choices, like believe in the angels and no back pain, or don't believe in the angels and back pain.
Right.
So I was like, all right, fine, angels. Do Jews even have angels? And, it was a whole thing. So there's the poignant story, the leaving. I've been given, and I'm so in the woo-woo world now, because going back and forth from LA, we've been listening to, Whitley Strieber's podcast and Unknown Country, and I'm into I'm photographing orbs, and I'm crop circles, and I'm so in this magical world of,
Right.
But that back pain does not come back. And I'm like, okay,
Whoa.
Angels. All right.
Yeah.
And then I think, well, the angel healing worked on the back, I guess I do have to quit smoking. This is how it starts. This is really how it starts.
Did you stop dairy?
I think I did, actually, for a while. I think I did stop dairy. And I tried to stop smoking, and I would stop smoking for and I learned such a huge thing from this, which is that you can only get the next step, and that's it. Because if the angels had said you can't drink, I don't think I would have done it. I don't think I would have been able to take that in.
Right.
So spiritually, I get this message, you have to stop smoking. And I'm like, well, all right. Yeah, that makes sense. So I try, and every couple of months, and then I take a few hits and smoke for a few days. No, I really have to quit. And then I'm staying on this block, and I've, probably it's been a few months since I've smoked, and my friend has pot, and I take like a quarter of a hit.
Right.
And I get so high.
Right.
It's like a quarter of a hit. Oh my God, I have to go lay down.
Right.
And I wake up the next morning and I'm still high. And his kids go to the Highland, the church, school at the church.
Sure.
And it's their Christmas pageant day.
Right.
And they're doing their Christmas show. And we go to this show, and there's all the parents with the kids, and they're singing all these Christmas songs, and God and angels. And I'm like, what is happening to my life? Why am I here? Why I didn't have kids? I didn't want kids, a conscious decision or whatever, but was it the right decision?
Sure.
And, oh my God. And was there something wrong? And that was it. It happened on this very block, my last hit of pot.
At the Oaks.
And then, but now I'm drinking, and I don't see any problem with that, because I'm allowed to. And then it wasn't until, and then I make this, and And then the angel healing sort of becomes the end piece of the happy story of us moving to the desert and the healing. And so I decided to write it as a book and do a show, and it's called 100% Happy 88% of the time. And I have all these ideas in it that are so similar to program.
Right.
I mean, it's so smart. All the like, that I always thought it went happiness, fine, unhappy, but then I saw that's the linear thinking, and if you put the two ends together, happy and unhappy are so close, and fine is down here, and it takes so long to get from fine to happy. But if you're willing to be unhappy, if you understand that life is circular and you're willing to be unhappy, it's so close right to happy.
Right.
But you have to jump over a moat, and it's of course hilarious, but and I understand. I have a whole song called Change, and change makes us so unhappy, but you have to change to be happy. And that's the irony of, so I'm talking about that. I mean, so much of what it is to really be a sober person is in this show, but I'm drinking.
Right.
And I start singing, and a director sees it and says, there's some little bits of music, but not really in the show. And then this producer saw it and was like, you need to have more music. And I was like, I don't think so. I can really sing it. But you do. And I'm going to introduce you to someone. And so I start singing, and singing cracks me open. Huh. I get absolutely cracked open, and I start to understand that comedy is all consonants, and it's hard, and it's ideas, and music. When you start to learn to sing, it's like sing the vowels. That's what they always say, sing the vowels. Ah, yow.
Sure.
And so now I realize I've got the whole alphabet. And it's also emotional, and the feelings that we don't want to have, don't be uncomfortable, but it's all in these vowels, and I'm singing. And then backstage one night, person I'm doing music with just pushes my drink away and says, that's not good for your voice. And I was like, oh, okay, sure. And I don't even think about it. I'm like, oh, sure, yeah, I don't need to drink before a show. I probably shouldn't. And of course, he's like, she's drinking before a show. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
But to me, I'm like, well, you drink before a show. That's what everybody does, right? And so, and then the same person suggests I might want to go to a meeting. Sober yoga meeting. He doesn't say it's a meeting. He says there's a sober yoga. I know this thing. It's sober yoga. It's sober yoga.
Trick.
And I said, sober yoga? That sounds like a meeting. It's not. It's not a meeting. And it's at your favorite yoga place. With this place that I knew I couldn't leave.
Right.
I knew I needed to be there.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, sure, stop it. So you need me. You don't want me to drink. So sure, I'll do it. It's sort of that thing of like, and yoga. And I mean, like not even thinking.
Right.
Like, you hear all these people tell these stories like, then I took myself to a meeting. And then there I am. And like, I've been handed the keys to the kingdom, and what's that? And I know the class is going too fast, and we're going to have extra time. And now we're in a circle, and there's sharing. And I'm like, well, I'm not an alcoholic, but I like these people, and I like the serenity.
And are people like, hi, I'm Nick, I'm an alcoholic?
It's a
meeting.
Full-on meeting.
It's a meeting.
It's a full-on meeting, but you do yoga first. And
amazing.
In the yoga, in the practice of the yoga, the principles of recovery are taught.
Right.
So when you're in Vera 2 and you look back, we learn to not regret our pasts, and all of that. It's all It's all in the thing, and then afterwards, but then people are talking about change, and this is my idea, it's like, I'm the serenity prayer. It's what I've been saying, and and then I afterwards was like, I don't know, was this an intervention? And he was like, well, I don't know, was it? And then I was like, yeah, sure, I don't have to drink.
I'll be intervened.
I'll be intervened. That sounds, yeah, sure. And then like the next day, it's 5:00 and I want to drink. And then I was like, oh, I really want to drink. Wow. I wonder and this question is what kept me sober for the first year. I wonder what I want so bad that's behind that drink.
Right.
I can't want this drink this much. I can't.
Right.
It's just not right.
Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Right. So what I say to myself is, I'll do it for a year.
Right.
I'll give it a year. And I know we do it one day at a time, and,
sure.
But like, I had to make that decision for me for a year. And I don't know whether I knew how hard it was going to be. I don't know what I was thinking, but I made that decision to just get through a year. And there were so many, and it was funny. I have this picture in my mind. I didn't come up with it. It just appeared to me that I was like crossing a river during that year, and I would shut my eyes and I would see myself like at different places, like farther and farther. Sometimes I'd be slipping in the water, sometimes it felt solid, but I was always going across this water to get to the other side. And as the year went on, I was getting closer and closer, and and I had the pink cloud, and then I had the pink cloud, and then it just really, 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 really was bad. And I was just crying all the time, but I had this picture of like getting to the other side. And when the year was up, I did see myself on the other side, but I saw an entirely different landscape. I was like, I somehow had thought you get to the other side and it will be the same as the side you left. And now I'm like, oh my God, it's like technicolor and weird and all that's all different and it's a whole different world. And now I know I'm never going back to this other side. I can't go back to the other side. So now I'm stuck,
Right.
Now I'm stuck being sober. But that was how really my first year, I got through my first year. And I did the things and I got a sponsor and I did the steps and, and my sponsor told me, a few months into, I had one sponsor didn't work anyway. My second sponsor, who is still my sponsor and a good friend. She, after a little bit, she said, you call me every day at 5. That's when you call me. And we laugh about it all the time. I mean, because it was just, I just replaced it. And it took me a long time to get past the feeling of like every day at 5, I need something.
Sure.
There have been enough miracles that the miracles did kind of keep me going.
Sure.
There was one where my sponsor gave me this card that said hope one way, and it was like, I think it was like my 9th month and I was going on tour, and it was going back to a place where I'd been drinking the year before, and I was very nervous, and so and it was just like very complicated. Anyway, there was a lot of things that were going to make it hard, and she gave me this card and she was like hope one way, and I said, I don't know. I don't believe in hope. I mean, I just don't believe in it. I mean, because in Hollywood, you hear sometimes, it's the hope that makes you, that's the hope that'll kill you. It's the hope that'll kill you.
Totally.
And it's not. It's hopelessness that will kill you. And, beyond hope, there's faith. I mean, there is something about hope that I'm not, like, perfect with, because in some ways it is about the future and it doesn't keep you in the present.
Right.
But it's not, hope isn't about something in the future. It's a feeling in the present about now that I think we neglect, that's really what hope is. We tend to think hope is about what's going to happen later. It's hope for the future. But hope is really a feeling that you're living in a present that has the potential to grow.
Totally.
And grow, I mean, people think create means to make, but create is a word that means to grow. It comes from a word that means grow. And I think this is part of the problem with like creativity and art in our world now, is like people just keep thinking about making things and aren't doing the things in their creative life that are going to help them grow. Not you, because you're doing this and it's helping you grow.
No, but it's definitely an interesting, one of the things I love about...
And then I have to tell you the miracle, but tell me this.
I love about stand-up is that process is product.
Yeah.
And that to me...
Although I've had networks tell me they'll never put on Cabaret Amp because it's too much process.
Too much process.
But
it was on Amazon, wasn't it?
Yeah, we did that. Yeah. But I've been plenty rejected.
Did you
happened in sobriety. 4. We did 4.
4.
Yeah.
I mean, that's when I first... a friend of mine did... A couple friends have done the show, and then I was like, I gotta see what this is about, and I watched the
Amazon things.
It's great, it's cool.
I mean, that was the miracle.
So wait, what was the miracle?
So the miracle. So she gives me this card, Hope One Way, this street thing, and I'm moving around and going, but I always take this card with me. I don't know, I just love her, and it makes me feel good. And wherever I go, I just have this little card with me, and it's. And then we get offered. A friend of ours is like, oh, I'm working at this venue, and. Waitering, and they have a showroom, and maybe you guys want, I'm going to hook you up. And we're sure. We go down. I mean, he gives us the address. I don't put it together, and we walk in, and it's what never happens in LA. They have this gorgeous showroom. It's like a hidden showroom. and they're going to pay us to do. I mean, it's like they're not even like the door. It's just like, here's a fee. It wasn't a big fee, but it was enough of a fee that in early sobriety, when everything is falling apart, you're like, what?
Oh,
That's amazing. Yeah. It's going to be, you know. And as we're walking out, I realized the venue is called First and Hope. And that it's on the corner of First and Hope Streets.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, if you don't believe in like,
that's
you know,
so cool.
It's like the tiniest vision board. I've just been carrying it around.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that was kind of a miracle. And there have been many, you know, but that one really was like, and so coming back, it had been like a year or two. I had taken off to do 100% happy 88% of the time. And you know, and fall apart and figure out what the rest of my life was. And so this opportunity I didn't even want to do on Cabaret. And then Mitch was like, oh, no, let's do on Cabaret. I was like, no, let's do something else. I'm so sick on Cabaret.
So you'd taken
we'd taken like a little bit of time off. And then I was just like, that show's dead to me. I mean, that show has taken everything from me. I have nothing left to give to that show. And because I did feel like everybody else had gotten famous and everybody else had these huge careers. And here I hadn't been able to make anything happen. And part of it is because I had painted myself into this peculiar corner of hosting on Cabaret. And what could you translate that to? Some friends saw, you know, and some people hired me for various things, but I hadn't been able to, you know, manifest some workable other career from it.
Right.
And so I didn't want to go back to it. But then, you know, Mitch was like, everybody loves On Cabin, you know, we'll put music in it and I'll do it with you and we'll make it different and it'll be the same but different. And I mean, in some ways, I didn't have that much of a choice. I didn't have like 50 other things that were like, hey, what about this job? So I was like, oh, okay. And, you know, we really committed. He's a musician, I'm a comedian, but we were like, we're both going to be producers and we're going to be, you know, it was suit up, show up, be a producer, do that first, have that be your first job. And that really was true. And then the Amazon things happened very soon thereafter. A friend of mine was working at Amazon and, you know, said, oh my God, On Cabaret's back. Wouldn't it be amazing? Blah, blah, blah. Well, it was very not, you know, it was super no money. But
yeah, but still, it's great exposure.
But it was great. And it was great for me to just sort of have to step up and learn to produce and know that I could do it and, you know, be able to. And it did make me feel like, okay, you know, I can at least, get these episodes on, put something down that wasn't just disappearing in the mists of time. You know, we had done that one Comedy Central show and where's that? And so,
you were saying when we started that, like, in that first year of sobriety, everything fell apart for you. You lost the house. You lost your marriage. How did
I come back?
How did you get through it? I mean, do you feel like that was I'm curious, was like all that wreckage, the aftermath of the wreckage that preceded it, or was it sort of like, oh, wait a minute, I'm conscious now. I don't want any of this. Like, I'm on the other side of the river.
Yeah.
And like,
I mean,
wow, I can't go back to that shit.
I could not go back.
Right. Interesting.
I couldn't go back. And I mean, the funny version of it is I'd been avoiding my parents because what was there to say? And, you know, finally the phone rang. And we had become house guests at like empty nesters and they had a bunch of rooms and we just sort of drifted. And my partner's mom was dying, so he was away a lot. And we just like really like separated, like it was just God just like pulling us apart.
Right.
Very non-confrontational. Anyway, so it was hard to talk because we were in these other people's houses, even though there was a lot of private space. So one day I picked up the phone and my mother said, I haven't talked to you in so long. Like, what's going on with like the show? Well, the show's the show's over. This was the 100% happy thing. Yeah. And the show's over. And what's happening with the house? I don't know. Maybe foreclosure. Maybe we're going to sell it. I think we're going to Airbnb it to get through. I don't know.
Right.
And then she says, well, how are your finances? I'm really not good. Really not good. I think maybe we're going to have to declare bankruptcy. How are things with your marriage? Which had always been the perfect. I was like, well, that's also not good.
Right.
And then there's like this silence. And so I say to her, well, Mom, as long as we're talking, I may as well tell you I also stopped drinking. And she said, now? With everything going on? Do you really think this is the best time for that? And of course, you know, partly if you're using you're using what you're using to as it's the glue, it's holding it together because you're not seeing it. And I mean, I really went as far as I could in that direction, and I just knew that I wasn't living up to my own belief of what I could do. I mean, I just knew I had come to once it was shown to me that this might be a problem, and I saw that it was a problem, I just knew I had to get through to the other side. I went to a lot of, I talked to a lot of old people who had old timers, people who had done it for a long time. I just knew that I had to be a better person. I just knew I had to be able to take the pain. I knew that I had to figure out how to have feelings and not be overwhelmed by them. I just knew there were some things that I wanted really badly. And that's part of it. When I see people struggling with it, I don't know if there's something they want badly enough, that they're just feeling deprived, that something's being taken away from them. Even when it was really hard, and it was really hard for, even once I landed with a place, it wasn't, there were times I was just like, I'm not going to drink, but I may not be able to stay. This is just too hard. And, I ended up living 10 minutes from City Yoga. I mean, I did end up getting a place exactly there. It was also very magical. But then I got held up at gunpoint right in front of that house. Very late one night. I was on my phone. I was in a car that didn't have locked doors because I'd been in a little fender bender, and it was a rental. So not my fault, but also my fault because I'm not paying attention.
Right.
And I got held up, and the door swung open, and these guys, had guns and were like, "You're, don't look down." And I felt like I'd learned how to take direction, and I just felt this giant surge of life and wanting to, I mean, there's no decision making. It's all intuitive. And I just screamed the scream of life. And that scared them, and they ran. Well, they grabbed my bag, and then they ran. Right. But they ran, and it was really a big part of my recovery, because I just knew, like, okay, you can't pretend that you don't want to be here. Right. Like, you do want to be here. I want to live, right. And I want to live really badly. Right. And you're gonna have to figure out some way, and it's So I just, and how I lived through it was, I really did collect people who I felt like were inspiring and strong, and I got eventually I did get a meditation. One of my podcast producer became a meditation teacher, and it all happened so very naturally. I actually had to give up my yoga practice for a while. I felt betrayed by yoga. I felt like I'd been doing all this yoga, and yoga hadn't told me I was drinking. Right. I got super mad at yoga. I was like, why didn't yoga tell me? Yeah. Like, it was some friend, Sure. Yoga's just you, Yoga's not like another person. So, I mean, who knows how bad it would have been without yoga. I mean, right. I've come to peace with it, but, and so your question is, how did I get through it?
I guess I don't know. I think just you told me.
Really, I just did. Yeah.
I think that's all. It's all really interesting stuff. And how are you now? I guess is the next thing.
How am I? Better. Yeah. I mean, I'm not where I want to be professionally. I'm still very ambitious. I'm trying to, get things made and get the deal,
Sure.
But I feel like a different person, and I have days that I need to call people where I've got to talk to my people, but I have a lot of people who are just doing the do in my life. Like, my world is filled with people who are doing it. And, right. I tend to gravitate towards spiritual experiences and church stuff and Jew stuff. And I mean, I'll go anywhere and do anything, and I mean,
an angel pull a psychic dagger out of your back. I mean, obviously you're open to possibilities. But I will say, yes, but when you're open to possibilities, you're really open to possibilities. But I will say that I really let a lot of that stuff go. Like, in the desert, I was given 10,000 crystals to give away, and I had the pendulum, and I would use that, and I gave a lot of that. I mean, all that stuff, I gave it up. The hocus pocus.
The hocus pocus is
Right.
gone. One of the other things that I really loved about the idea of sobriety was learning to trust your own intuition, to be trustworthy, so other people trusted you, and that by being trusted by other people, you come to trust yourself, and you trust your intuition, and to stay away from certain people. And I just feel like it's such a slow drip. I mean, I can't, there's not like a day. And still, I had a really bad week last week. I was really not in a good space. But then, we did the show Sunday night. And
where's the show?
The show's at Rockwell now.
Oh, right.
In Vermont. And it was so much fun. And everybody was so great. And I had the greatest time on stage. And I mean, after a certain point, after really committing to being a producer, I had to, slowly but surely, it was hard at first because I didn't know what to talk about on stage. I don't want to talk about sobriety, and but slowly but surely you start to understand your story, and your story gets deeper, and you start to understand life better, and there's more to share. And my teaching, that part of my life grew, and
you're teaching I teach people how to tell their story, right? Is that kind of
I teach people how to know what their story is and how to tell it. But I do a lot. I mean, I work also with people who aren't comedians necessarily. I work with all sorts of different creatives, from podcasts, from people who are like, I don't even know what I want to do. I just want to know my voice.
And is that, do you teach, is it a class?
It's something I call infinite writing. I mean, I've been teaching for a long time on and off, and I've taught.
Or is it private sessions?
Both.
It's both.
I do both.
It's like sort of coaching, and then
I do
also
coaching
classes.
individually, and then I teach a 6-week session once a season.
Oh, nice.
And I've also taught at UCLA Extension. Right. I've taught at Kripalu Center for Yoga and Health. Right. I've taught, I've taught at Second City. But it's always this idea of, I've been developing this teaching for about 16 years. And I taught with my partner. And then when we broke up, it was like, oh, I guess I teach alone now. And I think people did it was like a mom and dad thing. People did really like that. And, and I had to figure that out in sobriety. And I felt like such a fraud. I'm like, my whole life is falling apart. How can I tell people what to do? I don't know anything.
Sure.
But I got through it, and I found that the people who I needed in my life were around, and slowly but surely, anyway, so that is one piece of my life. And I had to finally admit, I don't want to be I love teaching as long as it's on the back burner.
Sure.
I don't like it. I don't want it ever to be the first thing.
Right.
But I am really good, and I've helped so many people. And when I was a kid, I'd never played house. I always played school. I never wanted to be a mother. I just wanted to be a teacher. So, yeah.
Well, it's funny. There's one thing I was thinking as you were talking. It's like the whole notion of the miracles, and I definitely experienced a lot of the miracles in my first couple of years of sobriety. But what I realized was that the miracle came from days and days and days of showing up every day.
Right.
That suddenly this miraculous thing would happen, and I'd be like, whoa. And then I would look back and be like, oh, that's because you came and did this tiny little amount of work that you committed every day to that thing, and that resulted in this thing.
Yeah, you never know. Well, the definition of miracle really is a shift in perspective.
Oh, interesting.
And when that's what makes it a miracle, is you see things suddenly differently.
Right.
It's a consciousness shift.
And I think that whole notion of becoming trustworthy to yourself and to others, that comes from that same sort of showing up every day in a trustworthy kind of way. I don't know, there are days when I feel completely worthless, and people call me for advice, and I'm like, why?
Right.
How much of a fucking loser are you that you're hoping I can give you advice? And then I look to like.
But then you remember feelings aren't facts.
Feelings aren't facts, and I try to remember like all the ways that I am showing up, even though it's maybe not generating any income for me, and I feel like that does come back in that you find that because you've shown up for so many people around you that suddenly when you need them, they're there for you in ways that, don't necessarily pay the rent, but sustain you,
Yeah, well, I love being in a life with people who are all working on changing and being better. Right. That to me is one of the greatest gifts because everyone who I'm close to in my life is somehow progress, not perfection. And, people that I've known from, for, 9 years, 8-9 years, and I can see like, nobody has the same issues. So it's so easy to see other people's things and how much it's just joyful to see people like, anger, it was never my particular thing, but not being able to articulate my feelings and being able to have feelings, but not, again, have them, but not be overwhelmed by them, right. To even know what they are. It takes me so long to even know I'm having a feeling. Right. And, other friends I've had who just anger is their thing, and to watch them really like be able to let it go. It's beautiful. I mean, right. I really wanted to believe the world can change. And if the world can change, then people have to be able to change. And if the only way I could believe that people were going to change was if I changed. Right. I mean, you said to me before we started, you love the stories, and it's true. A drunkalog is really somebody saying, like, I didn't understand I was unconscious. I became conscious. I mean, it's the story of becoming conscious over and over and over again, and then having to claim that conscious behavior and consciousness, and at the same time, the surrender. I mean, as you say, acceptance it's the hardest thing, and but at the same time you want to try to shape a life, and that really flummoxed me at the beginning. How can I keep handing it over? There's so much I have to do. I mean,
right, this sort of tension between opposites.
And that the living with that and the mystery. One thing that there was so much uncertainty in my life at the beginning. Another thing I really, 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 really tried to get at the beginning that I still sometimes have to articulate, but do sometimes naturally live now. Sometimes is uncertainty. That place of, you call it uncertainty or mystery. There's more God there. When the miracles live there. That's where the divine intervention happens. That's where the goddess is, whatever you want to call it. It never happens when you are in a place of, I know everything. I know exactly how it's going to go. There are no miracles in I know exactly how it's going to go. That's never where the miracles happen. So when I get to this place of uncertainty and I need to know, and where's that money going to come from, or how's that going to unfold, and when is that person going to say yes, and I can't control anything, then I really try to remember. I just remind myself, I love uncertainty. That's where God lives. And I mean, sometimes if I say that over and over enough times, I do believe it. And I do believe it, but I don't always live it in faith.
Sure.
So, I guess I would say, I go one day at a time hoping that I can live. My hope would be that I can live that more profoundly.
Right. Celebrate it in some way.
And that it doesn't disappear without me having to work to make it happen.
Sure. Well, Beth, it's been great. It's been, what if this is perfect?
What if maybe this is perfect? I actually made t-shirts for the 25th anniversary show that said maybe this is perfect. This is perfect. I made the maybe this is perfect t-shirts.
It's amazing. I love that so much.
They sold better than these boots are made for laughing t-shirts.
Well, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
This was really,
I hope
really
my experience,
cool.
strength, and hope has helped someone.
I'm sure it has. Hey, so if you've been enjoying this podcast, you can head over to my Patreon page and feel completely free to support the show with a modest contribution at www.patreon.com/thedrunkalogs. Drunkalogs cover art is designed and created by John DeManil, and the Drunkalogs theme song is composed and performed by Stephen Stout. I am Nick Morton.